Testing 1, 2, 3. Testing 1, 2, 3. Hey, what's going on, guys? This is Kevin Zwicker from Fast Count coming at you, and this is your 2025 AEW WrestleDream post show. What is there left to say when it comes to this feud between Jon Moxley and Darby Allin? We've seen so many different angles, whether it's these more technical singles matches, or it's these moments where we see things like Molotov cocktails involved, somebody being burnt, as we saw tonight, somebody being drowned and having skewers shoved in their nails. These guys have really went on to do a lot of insanely violent work together. I think that Jon Moxley has easily placed himself into the position of the ace of AEW. Imagine where AEW would be without Jon Moxley. And for him to be the guy to put over Darby Allin in such a high profile spot in the main event of a pay-per-view in a city that is flush with wrestling history, which we're going to get a little bit into a little bit later. But this was a very good to really, really, really good show. Now, my personal taste is that we do these things in the afternoon, but that's maybe because I am becoming an old man and I need my sleep. But guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. And we're going to do this a little bit differently. I know usually when I do my post shows, I like to just break it down from match by match. But today I kind of really want to just discuss the main topics and talk about, just really just how this show went down. We've seen a lot of different moments that are going to kind of really shift our way as to what's going to go down on Wednesday, where we saw tonight Mercedes Moné capture the interim ROH Women's Championship from Mina Shirakawa in an impromptu match. We saw it be set up that she is going to go up against Chris Statlander at Full Gear for the AEW Women's Championship. Hangman Adam Page was able to retain his championship against Samoa Joe, but we saw that he was jumped by the Ops afterwards. And the way that the show started off was very unique to me. I've never really, at least to my memory, I've never really seen a pay-per-view kickoff where we saw a match not be finished from the pre-show and immediately go into that match during the main show and having pyro kickoff. And that's what we saw with FTR and Jet Speed. Jet Speed, ever since they've come to AEW, Kevin Knight and Speedball Mike Bailey, they've really been able to make a good impression. They've been in multiple different high leverage scenarios. And for them to go up against FTR, who established as one of the best tag teams of the last decade, up there in the conversation with other tag teams like the Bucks and the Usos, them going up against the young up-and-comers, Jet Speed, and having a really back-and-forth match and delivering some spots and starting off the show with a bang, I thought was the right way to go. I personally think that maybe this might have been the moment where you would have had the young guys take the victory, but I know that FTR still has this ongoing story with Christian Cage and Cope, so you want to keep them as strong as possible for when Cope comes back from filming this season of Percy Jackson. But Jet Speed, no shame in their game. They came out and they looked as if they belonged with a team like FTR. They lost due to Stokely and a bunch of shenanigans, holding on to their feet while FTR was able to get the pin. But it was really solid work by those guys. Another talking point that I saw that was kind of going all over wrestling Twitter was, since they were in St. Louis, they had Lou Thesz's wife on ringside, right? And apparently, and I did not know this, and I'm sure now by the reaction that a lot of people didn't know this, but Lou Thesz and his wife had a pretty sizable age gap, right? And look, personally for me, what people do in their personal life is not my business, as long as it's between two consenting adults, which they happen to be. She was very young, in her early 20s, so it is what it is. You could chalk it up to Luthez had game and was able to, pick up somebody that young, or you could look at it like, that's gross. That's your own prerogative. Here at the Fast Count, we don't really judge if it's between two consenting adults for the most part. But a lot of time throughout this whole show, the women had a really strong presence. Jamie Hayter and Tekla. Tekla, ever since she has been involved in AEW and she has come over from Stardom, she has been a very good addition to the women's division. I know that there was kind of a sizable, hole that was left once Mariah May left and went over to WWE. And Tekla seems to be able to fit in that role very nicely. Ever since she's walked through the door, she has been feuding with Jamie Hayter. They finally had their one-on-one match on a high-profile spot on this pay-per-view, and these women really delivered. Jamie Hayter kind of gets lost in the shuffle sometimes. I know that she was gone for a sizable amount of time due to injury, and you had other people reemerge and kind of take over the division. If you remember, in the early days of AEW, it was pretty much the Britt Baker show. Then it kind of, morphed its way into getting to where Jamie Hayter was chosen by the fans. And then when she was injured, you had other big names come in like Toni Storm and Mercedes Moné kind of take up the spot. So she's now kind of in a position where it's like she's really working her way back to the upper echelon of the division and getting a big win against Tekla like this, furthering their storyline, which is building towards, the Blood and Guts show, the all-women Blood and Guts show, which I'm sure I'm going to have some good footage for you guys because it's close to my hometown, and I'll be there. And look, these are two hard-hitting women. Jamie Hayter was able to pick up the W where she hit the Haterade. She was able to further along this storyline. You saw at the end, Queen Emanata was there to congratulate Jamie Hayter. And then you see that the Triangle of Madness was, Sky Blue and Anna Jay were up there waiting for Tekla after she was able to kind of lick her wounds from taking that L. Next, we get into the Bucks versus Jurassic Express. The Bucks, who are pretty much, at least in my opinion, doing the best character work of their career with this whole broke Bucks gimmick. They came out to what I thought was funny was basically a bank statement of all their spending over the last several weeks. And it showed their current balance, which was $32. And you just had repeat, no music, just repeatedly over the loudspeakers, insufficient funds. Let me give you guys a personal story. I'm not going to name any names because I'm sure that he would be very upset if I did this because this is a personal story. Me and one of my closest friends, we went to a local restaurant in my area, and we were there watching football, and we were there all day, right? My team played the 1 o'clock game. His team played the 8 o'clock game, and we were there from 1 to the end of that 8 o'clock game, which his team happened to lose that night, by the way. So you're there for that many, you're there for that long. You kind of want to eat multiple times. We order something at the end. We're there to pay our bill, and the waitress come back. She gives me our receipt, and she looks at my friend, and she says, "Sir, your card's actually been declined." And this reminded me exactly of that. Jurassic Express. Jurassic Express, they have Jack Perry, not so much giving the Jungle Boy vibe, but giving the Jungle Man vibe, with him coming out dressed as like he is carrying, what's his name? From Spider-Man. Craven the Hunter. And these 4 guys really went out there and put on a show. If you're a fan of tag team wrestling, this was show for you, because we're going to talk a little bit later about the Brodito versus Takeshita and Okada match, which was really good too. But these four guys went out and did what they were, everybody knows that they're capable of doing. I think it was really important for Jurassic Express to get this win. And the Bucks, say what you want about them, whether you're a fan of them or not, they're two guys who happen to be very giving when it comes to taking, pinfall losses to a lot of teams. And we got multiple examples of this. They were, alongside with Tony Khan, very adamant that Sting was going to pick up the W in his last match. They were very generous in giving Private Party their tag team championship win when they took the titles off of the Bucks. Now, it didn't go anywhere after that, but still, they were very generous in doing that. And then tonight, where they took the L to Jurassic Express in their first match back in several years as a tag team, I think that they deserve their flowers when it comes to their willingness to take pins in big spots like this, because I think we're all pretty familiar with the fact that there's a lot of egos when it comes to professional wrestling, right? And Darby Allin spoke about this during his interview with Ariel Helwani, when he talked about how professional wrestling is probably the best thing ever, but at the same time, it's scripted, right? Predetermined, fake, whatever word you want to use. And you got guys who are unwilling to lose in a scripted, predetermined show. And it's just like, check your ego out the door, but these guys were able to really go out there and do it. There was a lot of false finishes. It looked as if, the Bucks were able to, were in a position to possibly win. Then the momentum kind of shifted back and forth throughout the whole match. Of course, it was $500,000 on the line, so the Bucks were extremely motivated to pick up the W. Unfortunately for them and their bank account, they were not successful in that endeavor. We see Jurassic Express pick up the W. What's more important, outside of how good of a match this was, is the fact that after this match, we see the Don Callis family come in and jump Jurassic Express. The Bucks, they look as if they're hesitant to leave the ring, but they leave the ring anyways. We see Kenny Omega's music hit. He looks at the Bucks and instructs them to get back into the ring to help out Jurassic Express. They don't. Kenny Omega goes in there and he helps clean house. Jurassic Express and Kenny Omega, they were standing tall after this. Kenny Omega, who rightfully so, was very hesitant in believing Jack Perry and thinking that his intentions were good, now looks as if he is willing to believe him, and it looks as if they're on the same page. Kenny Omega, in my opinion, is the centerpiece of AEW. I feel as if he is the one main character. He should be AEW's Roman Reigns, right? Where the show kind of revolves around him when he's there. And I don't think I'm speaking out of school here when I say I think it's very highly unlikely that we're ever going to get Kenny Omega at 100% again. That being said, I think, let's just say he's at 70. I think a Kenny Omega that is 70% is better than 95% of wrestlers at 100%. And I think that he really should be used kind of as a special occasion or a special act, as if he's going to be on Dynamite wrestling a match, it needs to be on one of the more special edition of Dynamites, like the Blood and Guts, or when they do the Fighter Fests and things like that. Or if he's going to wrestle matches on Dynamite, it's going to be because it's going towards a bigger story, setting up a big money match. I don't think that he should just be wrestling random people on the show. But good to see Kenny help out Jurassic Express. The Broke Bucks are funny. Kenny is a nice man. He helped the dinosaur. Yes, he did help the dinosaur. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. GOA versus the Hurt Syndicate. This was for a number one contender shot at the only break glass for Kenny. I agree. Sorry. This is for a number one contendership opportunity for the Trios Championship. The Hurt Syndicate, one of the more over groups in all of AEW, going up against GOA and Ricochet. GOA and Ricochet is tied 1-1 heading into this match between the Syndicate and them. I think the fact that GOA has been putting in a position where they are now featured on the show prominently. They're connected with an act in Ricochet, who, in my opinion, is one of the more entertaining acts on the whole roster. And going up against the Syndicate, where they took their first pinfall loss to them, right? Which is significant because we hear all these different rumors online that, the Syndicate doesn't want to take pins. That's something that they were accused of. That's a narrative that MVP has rebuffed and refuted. But tonight, where we saw glimpses of the old MVP hitting the ballin', which was my favorite move as a kid. MVP was one of my guys. I thought he had the coolest entrance. One of the coolest entrances in all the SmackDown history when he came out to the tunnel and with all the smoke and fog. I thought it was awesome. So the Syndicate was able to pick up a win. But the interesting part about this is it protected Ricochet in the sense, who's also one of those guys who isn't afraid to take a pin. We see at the end, which was a callback spot to something that happened earlier in the match, where MVP was kind of cornered by the whole demand. We see Ricochet as an opportunity where it's very reminiscent to King Laurinaitis and 300, where he's just waiting for all the bow and arrows to take him out from the Persians. Ricochet was there, just waiting for the Syndicate to finish him off, but Bishop Khan pulls him out of the ring and basically kind of sacrifices himself, and he takes all three finishers from the Syndicate, and the Syndicate pick up the win, and they are now the #1 contenders for the Trios Championship, which, if you guys don't know, happened to be the Ops, which the dynamic of that match changed dramatically, which we're going to discuss in a little bit, from what went down in that world title match between Samoa Joe and Hangman Adam Page. Guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. It helps the channel out in more ways than you even know. I think the way that these matches really set up this week of Dynamite is interesting. I think it's going to be a very loaded show. I think that AEW gets a lot of criticism with the fact that their shows after pay-per-view don't tend to feel as special as they should, which is something that I tend to agree. I feel like when you have shows like this where you got a lot of positive momentum, you kind of want to capitalize on it. And when you kind of have shows after the pay-per-view that just feel kind of more so like a normal episode of Dynamite instead of something bigger and special, it kind of just, in my opinion, it kind of just wastes the momentum and the positive feedback from when you have these good shows. Next, we get into Kyle Fletcher versus Mark Briscoe. Kyle Fletcher, a guy who Stevie Richards says is not a very good wrestler, and he's at the point of his career where he should go to NXT so he can learn from the guys in NXT to eventually get good enough to be able to hang with the guys in NXT, which, if you've seen some episodes of NXT where it's very obvious that there's a lot of individuals, men and women, on that roster where a lot of things are choreographed, and if you were to take them out of that very much so controlled environment, that they might not be able to swim. It might be a position where they would sink. I think it's pretty insane. Fletcher, Briscoe, I think these are two guys who really are in a position where their chemistry and the way that their characters work, I think really works well. Coming into this, they were tied 2-2. Fletcher's obviously a guy who is in a position where AEW is looking for him to be their next star. I think he's right there on the cusp. I think in the early days in AEW, where it was really obvious that MJF was going to be the next guy to pop, once we got through the upper echelon of the main event guys that we had then, I think it's pretty obvious right now that Fletcher is in that position where it's not if It's more so when he's going to become AEW World Champion. But these two guys went out and they really put on a show. Briscoe, if you really look at the whole picture of this thing, hasn't been a singles act for that long. I know he's been wrestling for a very long time, but the dynamics of being a singles wrestler and a tag team wrestler is very much so different. And it's funny because if you really think about it, these are two guys who are known as tag team wrestlers, right? Kyle Fletcher with Mark Davis. Mark Briscoe was with his brother. So the fact that we have two guys who for the longest were primarily tag team wrestlers being put in positions where they have to be singles wrestlers and being where they are now putting on good matches, putting on quality matches on a pay-per-view, it's a testament to how much work they've been able to put in. Both of these guys are really good inside of the tag teams. Yeah, I agree. I agree. Looking back at this, it's going to be really hard to say what is the match of the night, just because it feels like every match on this card was at least good. I think that when it comes to the graphs that we're seeing on these pay-per-views in AEW and in WWE, where they like to keep their card very tight, very much so 5 to 6 matches on the card, I think it's really hard to pinpoint just lousy matches for the most part. Kyle Fletcher was able to pick up the win. Mark Briscoe went out like a man, very much so on his shield. And I look forward to what we're going to do with Kyle Fletcher. It's the way that he's been able to take this TNT championship and take it from a title that for long stretches of time felt as if it was really irrelevant. When Cody Rhodes was able to first win it in the beginning, and then we had it on guys like Brody Lee, Mr. Brody Lee, and other points in times, where in the beginning where it felt important. There was other times where I felt like it was pretty much so irrelevant because they were just tossing it around and playing hot potato with it. And now with this reign that Fletcher has had, I think he's really been able to reinvigorate and really reemphasize how important this title is and really make it feel back to its glory days where it was supposed to be pretty much in the position of the stepping stone title that you get before winning the world title. Next, we get into the women. Statlander versus Toni Storm for the AEW Women's Championship. Toni Storm playing, this LA Noir type of angle with this feud that she's having with Statlander. This whodunit type of spin to this character that she's developed. I think it really worked well here. Stat, the alien, the individual from another galaxy. I think that out of the matches that both women have had outside of this feud that they've had, I think this is one of their better matches. I think this is Toni Storm's best match since the Hollywood ending. I think Statlander has been really putting in a lot of solid work. I mean, Stat's one of the founding members of the women's division since the inception of AEW. I think this is really a good passing of the torch moment. Toni, who has been the flag bearer of the women's division for the longest, working with individuals like Mariah May, now with Stat, and putting them in positions where they can kind of take the torch and run with it. It speaks to the selflessness of Toni Storm as well. Stat was able to pick up the big W. She was able to pick up the pinfall win against Toni Storm. Good for Stat. Toni, no shame. It's interesting to see where her character is going to go now with her not having the AEW title. We saw little glimpses of it later on. But before Stat could really celebrate this win, she's interrupted by the GOAT, Mercedes Moné. Mercedes Moné coming off of her victory at Arena Mexico. against Persephone. She interrupts that, and she basically tells Sas to get the hell out of my ring. She issues an open challenge to any champion in the back. She's answered by Mina Shirakawa, who is the interim ROH Women's Television Champion. These two have had matches before in the past, but I think this was easily their best match they've had between the two. Mercedes, Ultimo Mercedes, she's on the run of her life. There's a bunch of different arguments that you could make, and I see both sides when it comes to this. Titles are supposed to be kind of these sacred kind of things in the grand scheme of things. If you really look at it, they're just props with professional wrestling just being a work. But hey, let's get past that. But there's certain people who have the argument that you have so many titles, having a million titles, kind of dilutes things, and having a million titles is basically the same as having zero, if it's so easy to obtain. But for me, with this character that she has, where she is this goal chaser, I think it fits well. Now, I think that these are titles that most normal people wouldn't see, or most normal people wouldn't be exposed to. So I think that the off chance that you see these titles in different places that Mercedes is carrying around, I think it adds to the possibility that people might want to Google this company that they see Mercedes the champion of, check out some of their matches. Who knows? Maybe gain a fan or two. I think it's a win-win all the way. And also for the smaller companies that now have Mercedes as champion, she's going to have to come back to defend it. So it helps their business in the long run too, or at least for the nights that Mercedes happens to be on the show. Mina, big fan. Thought this match was really high caliber graps. Mercedes, I don't think that she is capable of having a bad match. I think her worst matches you could qualify as somebody's best match of their career. Mercedes was able to pick up the win. Red Velvet, who is the women's television champion, is out for an extended amount of time. That's why we have the interim label at this title. I think this sets up a good opportunity for when Red Velvet does come back. She has a match waiting on her with Mercedes, which is a good opportunity for her. And if you really want to, you can set it up to where Red Velvet gets a big-time win against Mercedes Moné. I think Mina and Tony are your new tag team champions. I think it's a good possibility. I think that's a good possibility on Dynamite. We're going to get the brackets revealed for who is going to be in there. So I don't think that's a bad idea. It gives them both an opportunity to do something different without chasing the AEW Women's Championship. Next, we're going to get into Brodito versus Okada and Takeshita. If you've been paying attention, you've been seeing that it's been a power struggle between Okada and Takeshita. Two guys who are having the run of their lives. Okada, big-time win against Kenny Omega at All In, where he has become the unified champion. He won the Continental Classic last year. Takeshita, fresh off of his IWGP Heavyweight Championship win against Zack Sabre Jr. Shout out to Takeshita for that. So you got these two guys who want to be the alpha dog, right? Imagine a basketball team that has Kobe Bryant and Michael Jordan, right? Two guys who have this alpha male type of aura competing for who is going to be the top guy in the Don Callis family, going up against Brodito, who is my tag team of the year. And you can make an argument that Bandito is the wrestler of the year with the high caliber matches that he's had as the ROH champion. And these four guys went out there, and you knew it. When you have names like Okada and Takeshita and Brody King and Bandito be involved, you know that you are in for a treat. And you could go into this match thinking that, okay, if we're going off of just the momentum, you would think it's kind of a shoe-in that Okada and Takeshita would be able to pick up the W. But with the fact that they have this, tension between the two where they're looking to one up the other, it's not that hard to believe that you're going to have something to where there's going to be some type of mishap or some type of shenanigans to where they weren't going to be able to where they were going to be able to capture the gold. And we saw that here. The ego kills. Takeshita was taken out by Okada by a Rainmaker. Okada takes the pin from Bandito, which is crazy to think about, right? Okada, the unified champion, taking the pin. These four guys went out there and just put on a show. If you didn't check out the match, I highly recommend that you do, because outside of the main event, I think that this is up there with the match of the night. That match was great. Those four guys killed it. It was announced after that we're going to see Okada versus Bandito for the Unified Championship at Dynamite this week, which I'm looking forward to. I think that this is going to add another interesting wrinkle with the Don Callis family. Now you have it to where Takeshita can have that carrot that he can dangle in front of Okada's over his head, where he says, you were the one who took the pinfall in that match, not me. You are the weak link between the two. And good stuff. Good directions that we could possibly go heading out of this show. Next, we get into the AEW World Championship match between Samoa Joe and Hangman Page. Samoa Joe, a guy who up to this point was undefeated against Hangman Page, which is something that they emphasized a lot heading into this match. And for me, when you do things like that, it's kind of a dead giveaway of who's going to win. Now, I think it's pretty obvious to a lot of people that Hangman was going to come out of this match as the winner, because I don't think it's his time to lose the title. I don't think you go through this long emotional story that they did with Hangman Page leading to All In just for him to lose the championship so soon. Oh, shit, I'm getting tired. For a lot of this match, Samoa Joe was the guy who was in control. And I think that's to be expected due to the size difference, and Joe being a guy who is known to have this aggressive energy. And it looked as if Hangman Page was just at a loss. He just threw the kitchen sink at Samoa Joe, and Joe just had a counter for everything. Joe was presented very strongly in this match, but then it got to a point where Hangman Page hit a buckshot, wasn't able to take Joe out. Hit another buckshot, wasn't able to take Joe out, and then a third buckshot was finally that last bullet that was able to put Joe down. 1, 2, 3, Hangman Page wins. It looked as if everything was kind of kumbaya. The other ops members come out, and this is when I should have known that it wasn't kumbaya, but Hangman Page offers to shake Samoa Joe's hand. Joe shakes his hand. They lift Hangman Page's arms up. And then the other ops start jumping Hangman Page, and Joe takes the title, hits Hangman Page in the head with the title. The ops are heels, which makes a lot of sense heading into their match against the Hurt Syndicate, which, in my opinion, they're tweeners. But I guess in this match, they are less of bad guys when it goes up against the ops. And I'm looking forward to that match. Adds a new layer to Joe. I personally think that Joe is good as a babyface, but I find him a little bit more interesting and more intriguing as a heel. Please remember to hit that like button and subscribe if you haven't. Helps the channel out in more ways than you guys even know. Next, we're going to get into the main event. And you knew that this match was going to be violent. And you knew that there was going to be tons of run-ins. And you knew that the ops were going to have the numbers advantage throughout this whole match. But what you didn't know is who was going to be in the corner of Darby Allin and who was going to be somebody to assist him. I had a couple of guesses. I thought that Bryan Danielson somehow, some way was going to get involved in this match. I thought heading into it, what it was going to look like is that Darby Allin was going to be getting tortured throughout this whole match, which he happened to get tortured throughout this whole match. But there was going to be an opportunity where at some point he was going to have Mox on the ropes, and then that the Death Riders were going to reveal that they had Bryan Danielson captured or something. Because if you noticed, Danielson was not on commentary for this show. So I thought that's kind of peculiar and interesting. So I thought they were going to have some type of reason why. And the reason why was he was captured by the Death Riders, and they're going to force Darby Allin to quit. And if he didn't say I quit, they were going to murder Danielson or something along those lines, or he was going to get an assist by Sting. And we did see him get an assist by Sting, the GOAT, right? But this match, with it main eventing, I knew that we were going to have a lot of violence in store, right? And I knew that they did that purposely because they knew nothing else on the card was probably going to be able to follow that. And there's different spots. And the spot where that really kind of had it to where I was going, ooh, like, my spine tingling, was the spot where we saw Jon Moxley have Darby Allin's hand pinned, on the stairs. And Marina went under the ring, and it was revealed that she went and got some skewers, right? Those wooden skewers that we've seen be shoved in Mox's head on other different occasions. And we see Mox take those skewers and just stick them in the fingernails of Darby Allin, which had to hurt like the freaking Dickens, right? That was pretty nasty. We see Darby Allin spray lighter fluid on Jon Moxley. He brought a bag with him to the ring. So you kind of knew that there was going to be some toys, some very violent toys in there. They were going to play a factor into this match. And Mox was about to get set on fire. Then the Death Riders came to the assist of Jon Moxley. Jon Moxley was able to get a towel thrown at him by Claudio and wipe the lighter fluid off of him. We see Darby Allin have a stun gun in that bag that he brought. Jon Moxley takes the stun gun out of the bag. You see them fight over it. Marina comes from behind and low blows Darby, and then he gets electrocuted by the stun gun, which had to hurt. Another thing that was pretty intensely violent is when you see the Death Riders set up two tables by the ring, and we see Claudio gorilla press slam Darby Allin. It looked as if he was going to do it through the tables, but he changes his mind, and from like one end of the ring all the way to the announce table, just tosses Darby Allin like a sack of potatoes. And at that point, I assumed that the guy passed, because that was just so insanely violent. Then they get to a point where they break out a fish tank. They load it up with some water, and then they just start dunking Darby's head into the fish tank and just drowning him. Mox is beating Darby Allin with his own belt, mercilessly throughout this match. There's times where Darby Allin is able to get a little bit of a fight on Jon Moxley. Darby Allin brought his AEW flag that he placed on the top of Mount Everest with him, and he choked Jon Moxley out of it. Very reminiscent to the spot where we saw at All In with Hangman and Mox. Looked as if that wasn't working. Everything just looks very bleak for Darby Allin. He's getting his head dunked into the fish tank multiple times. Then we see the arena go black. When the arena went black, I knew who it was. Lights flash. We see the Stinger in the ring. He empties out the ring by hitting the Death Riders with multiple members of Death Riders with the bat. He clears it out. He sees Jon Moxley. He tosses the bat to Darby Allin. Darby Allin does the thing where he signals that he's going to use it on Jon Moxley. John Mox is basically telling him to do it, taking the bat and placing it on his head. Darby beats him with the bat multiple different times. Marina looks as if she's going to get back into the ring. Sting puts her over his shoulder, takes her into the back. She's not a factor anymore. The other members of the Death Riders are laid out because of the bat attack by Sting. Darby, after he's done beating John Moxley up with the bat, he hits his Scorpion Death Drop on Moxley, then hits the Scorpion Deathlock on John, and John says, "I quit." Darby Allin wins for AEW. He picks up his first ever win against John Moxley in the main event of WresteDream. Everybody goes home happy. Very, very solid show. On the Dave Meltzer star ratings, I give it a 4. Yes, Darby Allin needs more friends than Sting. The fact that nobody came out and helped Darby outside of an old man who doesn't work for the company, who isn't a wrestler anymore, who's retired, kind of makes it look as if, damn, this guy Darby Allin must just be a complete jerk backstage for nobody else to help him but Sting. But we got the return of the Icon tonight. Darby was able to pick up the big W. I'm interested to see where does this leave the Death Riders. After we saw John Moxley say, "I quit," and after he lost his world title at All In, I think it's kind of going to be interesting now where we see if they want to play up if there's going to be some deception in the ranks with the Death Riders, especially with a guy like Claudio, where you're looking around and you're thinking to yourself, wow, this guy is supposed to be our leader and all, but he lost the title. He quit against Darby Allin. Why do I need to be listening to him? It opens up that possibility, and I'm interested to see if that's the direction they're going to go after this. And I'm interested to see where they're going to go with Darby Allin too after this big time win. But guys, it's late. I got to get some sleep, but we'll be back on Monday for the Raw post show, and we'll be back next week for the AEW Dynamite post show. But guys, please remember to hit that like button and subscribe. I am Kevin Zwicker. I'm out.